Clay Hammond is a very successful and famous writer. He's doing a reading of his new book titled The Words in a room packed with guests. If only they knew he was a Trumpy. The story starts with an old man watching Rory and Dora Jansen get in their car. Rory Jansen is a young author who found success after releasing his book, Window Tears. He wins the American Fellowship of Arts and Letters Award, just another award for his book. His wife, Dora, can't be happier for him. Looking back at what happened, Rory Jansen was fresh out of college just 5 years ago. He moved to New York with his girlfriend, Dora, whom he loved so much. He didn't have a job, so he wandered the streets during the day and spent the nights writing. Oh, so he was dusty and she was supporting him? One night, Dora tries to get Rory to explore her, but he says he got a lot to write. Then she shakes her backpack, saying to put his map in her, so he does. After writing the book, he planned to send it to an agent recommended by his professor. However, Dora was aware that they're not making any money. Having run out of funds, Rory visited his father, Mr. Jansen. Mr. Jansen already knew why he came, so he told Rory to take a real job and just treat his writing as a hobby. Pissed, Rory is about to walk out, but Mr. Jansen called him back, wrote him a check, and insisted it would be his last handout. A new guest walks in the auditorium to listen to Clay Hammond. He continues to say that Rory sent his work to every possible agent that might publish him, but he never heard back from any of them. So he was forced to take a job. He chose to work in one of the biggest publishing houses in New York, hoping he'd get connected with an agent. But he heard nothing. Then he and Dora finally got married. They went to Paris for their honeymoon and visited different antique shops, looking for something to buy. Rory then found a very old leather briefcase. Dora had bought it for him, and they took it back home after the honeymoon. Then all of a sudden, Rory finally received a call from an agent. Jason Reaver was known to have very strict standards. He showered Rory with compliments, saying his work was honest and beautifully done, and he was overjoyed. Rory was overjoyed, but the agent quickly burst his bubble. Jason Reaver said there was no market for a book like his, especially because he was a nobody. However, all Rory needed was that one person to believe him, even in a room of 100 people. Rory only received rejection letters one after the other, and that was enough to shake his spirit. And Dora kept supporting him until one day Rory found what looked like a manuscript inside the old briefcase. He started reading it and realized that he couldn't put it down until he finished it. He kept thinking about the book and how he could never become a writer as good as the one who wrote it. The thought followed him while they were out to dinner with some friends. He fought with Dora for the first time and ranted about how he wasn't happy with his life because everyone around him is great and he's just dusty. He isn't the great writer he thought he would be. Even ChatGPT writes better. Then, having realized what he said, he apologized to Dora later that night. However, Rory just couldn't forget the story he read, and he felt compelled to type down the manuscript he found. He wanted to feel as if the story was coming from him. He didn't edit it and copied all the same punctuation marks, even the wrong spelling. This is me when I have a paper due the next day. A few days after, Rory came home to find Dora crying. She saw the story on their computer and read it. It affected her so much, believing that it showed her the sides of Rory she always believed he was hiding. Rory tried to explain that it wasn't his, but Dora didn't let him. Instead, she encouraged him to submit the manuscript because she tired of supporting his broke ahas. So, Rory took it to work and handed it to Mr. Joe Cutler, an agent. He only wanted his opinion. A few months have already passed, and Rory somehow forgot about it. Then Mr. Cutler called him to his office, saying that he wrote an amazing work of fiction and that he wanted to represent Rory. He didn't know what to do, so he just signed the contract. And just like that, The Window of Tears was published and was a huge success. May this success find me randomly because I'm tired of doing these voiceovers. After reading the first part of the story, Clay is approached by a beautiful young woman named Daniela, a grad student at Columbia and an aspiring writer. She flirts with him out in the open, and he takes her to a secluded room away from the crowd. This man trying to break her back during the intermission. She admits that she knows everything about him because she has read every single interview of him. She also knows that Clay has been with his wife since the first year of college. So Clay says he and his wife are separated, although he still wears his wedding ring. The conversation is cut short when Clay is called to continue the reading. He says that Rory takes the bus one morning, unaware that the old man is following him. The old man approaches him at the park and strikes up a conversation. He says he's a fan and that Rory's book is a masterpiece. He even asks Rory for his autograph. Then he says he has a story to tell, and if Rory chooses to write it, he wants some credit. But Rory thinks it would be unfair and just shrugs it off. Then the old man says it's a story about a missing manuscript getting stolen. Curious, Rory stays and lets the old man finish what he has to say. He about to gag you for plagiarism. It was a story about an 18-year-old named Jack who was sent to Paris just after the war. It was 1944. Life was tough, but he was happy with his companions. A friend introduced him to reading, and he soon found himself being fascinated with books. One day he met a young French woman named Celia and fell in love right away. She barely knew any English, and he barely spoke any French. But the two were deeply, and he went deep in love. But Jack got discharged from the military and was sent back home. For the first time, he felt like he didn't belong. He tried to write, but he couldn't. He missed Celia, so he dropped everything and returned to Paris. Jack got a job at a local English newspaper. Life was simple, but he was happy. They got married 2 weeks later, and soon Celia gave birth to a baby girl. Jack felt like he had everything, but the baby always got sick and soon died. Celia was inconsolable. Jack tried to continue moving forward for both of them, but Celia was never the same. One night, he came back to find a letter from Celia saying she'd be staying at her mother's house in the country. Now alone, Jack was overcome by grief and anger. He started to write the story of his life. The words just poured out of him, and he didn't stop until he was done. He looked for Celia and found her, but she begged him to return to Paris alone, and so he did. But he left the manuscript with her. Celia read it and decided to come home 2 weeks later. She was so happy to see Jack that she forgot the leather briefcase on the train and only realized it when Jack started asking for it at home. They couldn't find it, and Jack confronted Celia for losing it, saying writing the story is what saved him. Jack says Celia isn't the only one who lost a child. This offends her, so she slaps him. They went to the train station but failed to find it. They tried working out the relationship, but it didn't last, and Jack decided to leave Celia and head back home. He never returned to Paris. Then Jack, who was now an old man, found the book written by Rory. It all seemed familiar to him. It was his story. Rory tried to explain, but the old man didn't let him. He just wanted to tell Rory the real story in case anyone asked about it. But he admits he couldn't write another story after that. After the event, Clay finds Daniela still waiting for him. They have agreed to take the conversation back to Clay's apartment, where they can have more privacy. But we all know what Clay really wants to do. While Clay is getting some liquor downstairs, Daniela opens a book on a table and finds a photo of a black woman inside. She presses Clay to tell the rest of the story and what happened to Rory and the old man. Wanting to please the beautiful student, Clay reveals that Rory is left wondering what to do next. So Rory starts drinking. When he's completely wasted, he comes up with a decision. He confesses the truth to Dora that he stole the book. He somehow blames her for believing the story was his. And for a moment, Rory believed he wrote it. And back then, the consequences of publishing a stolen story didn't cross his mind. Disappointed, Dora asks for some time alone. She knows that this will be a big issue if people find out. Rory is determined to make things right. He wants his name removed from the work. However, he is aware that the reason his other books sell is because of the first one that was published. Mr. Cutler advises him to offer some financial compensation to the old man in exchange for his silence. The guilt continues to haunt Rory, and Dora tells him he's not the only man who ever made a mistake. She wants him to not give up and even suggests having a baby so they can move on with their lives. A few days later, Rory looks for the old man and finds him working in a greenhouse. He tries to start a casual conversation, but the old man knows Rory came just to make sure he wouldn't talk. Rory thinks there must be a reason why the old man approached him, so now he's offering him some money. Not as compensation, but the money that the book earned. But the old man doesn't want recognition, fame, or fortune. He just had to tell Rory that it was not just fiction, but a story of his life, his wife, and their daughter. He just had to tell the tragedies that created those words. This when I know this movie fake AF because I'd take that money in a heartbeat. Then the old man reveals that he saw Celia one last time. He was on the bus, traveling from work, and life had lost its meaning. He saw Celia with a new husband and a young boy. He waved at her, and she waved back. The old man admits that although it made him sad, he was relieved that she found happiness again. He tells Rory not to come back again and to continue to live with the choices that he made. And with that, Rory left. He continues to act as if the story is his. Clay tells Daniela that a few weeks after Rory visited, the old man died. Rory took the manuscript and had it buried with the old man, together with their secrets. No matter what Clay says, Daniela feels like he is holding back. She thinks that Rory and Dora tried to work things out for a while, but when they looked at each other, they were both reminded of the lie they were living. Daniela wants Clay to admit that he is, in fact, Rory, but Clay is quick to tell her there's a difference between fact and fiction. It gets intense, and soon they are all over each other, making out. Clay takes a step back before telling Daniela that she should leave. He doesn't give her an explanation, but all he can think about is how Rory kept apologizing to his wife, Dora, for what he did. That's the end of the movie. Pretty much confirms that Clay is Rory in the story. What did you guys think of this one?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.